There's a moment you've felt more than once, but perhaps never paused to name. It comes quietly, like a sudden chill when you're alone in a room, or the pause before you hit send on a message that says too much of your truth. It lives in those seconds of hesitation before you speak, before you act, before you let yourself be fully seen. And beneath that pause, fear, not the obvious kind, not the fear of danger or failure, but a subtler, deeper kind, the fear of being known. You feel it when someone looks at you for a second too long, when they say, "Tell me how you really feel," and you flinch not because you don't know, but because you do. It's the fear that if you drop the mask, even for a moment, everything will unravel, that you'll be too much or not enough, that the real you will be met with silence or worse, judgment. But no one told you this fear had a name. No one said that part of growing up would involve learning to wear masks so well. Even you would forget you were wearing them, and no one warned you that eventually they would become so heavy, you'd mistake the weight for who you are. It's not your fault. You were taught early to survive, not to be whole. You learned how to read a room before you learned to read your own emotions. You picked up on what was welcome and what wasn't, where your light was too bright, where your voice echoed too loud. You shaped yourself to be acceptable, palatable, safe. But something inside you resisted, some small, persistent spark, a quiet knowing. That spark is still there. Isn't it flickering behind your eyes when you dare to dream, whispering through your chest when your heart breaks open for something more? It's the part of you that hasn't given up, no matter how many times you've tucked it away for later. And yet, the fear, the unnamed, unexplained ache, why does it return just as you begin to step into your truth? Why does the moment of courage so often arrive with its twin terror? Carl Jung would tell you this is the moment the shadow awakens. The fear isn't a flaw in you, it's a signal. The mask you've worn for protection has begun to crack, and the self behind it is asking for light. But light is blinding at first. It demands you see everything the beautiful, the broken, the longing, the rage. It demands presence. And presence is terrifying when you've been taught to flinch. So you avoid, in subtle, socially acceptable ways. You scroll, you stay busy, you people please, you second-guess the email, the outfit, the choice. You call it humility, or realism, or maturity. But beneath all of it is the fear you still haven't named. Here's the truth. Fear thrives in vagueness. The more you avoid naming it, the more it shapes you. But the moment you say it aloud, to yourself, even in a whisper, something begins to shift. Maybe your fear isn't that you'll fail. Maybe it's that you'll succeed and no one will recognize you anymore. Maybe your fear isn't that you'll be abandoned. Maybe it's that you'll finally choose yourself and have no one left to blame. Maybe your fear isn't that you're not lovable. Maybe it's that being loved would force you to receive what you still withhold from yourself. So, what is your fear's name? Can you sit with it without flinching? Can you look it in the eye without turning away? What happens if you stop resisting the fear and let it speak? Because fear, when fully felt, softens. It transforms, not into courage, but into clarity. It shows you what matters most. It reveals the parts of you that are still waiting to be chosen, and it invites you to step forward, not as someone who is fearless, but as someone who is finally willing to be real. Let the pause come. Let the trembling stay. Let the voice shake. This is not a sign you are broken. This is a sign you are on the edge of truth. And truth, even when it terrifies, is always the beginning of healing. So take a breath and listen. There's a particular discomfort in looking into the mirror, not just the glass one, but the one made of moments, of relationships, of silence. That mirror is everywhere. It's in how someone reacts when you say no. It's in how you feel when your needs are unmet. It's in the stories you tell yourself about why you can't be more, do more, or feel more. And the truth is, you often avoid it. Because what stares back is not just your reflection, it's the part of you you've spent years trying not to meet. This is the shadow, not evil, not wrong, just unseen. The version of you that you were told was too much or not enough. The part that carries your rage, your sensuality, your neediness, your power. The part you learned to lock away because the world gave you no space to understand it. But still, it waits, patiently. It watches from behind the mirror and waits for the day you'll be ready. And now, as your fear rises and your outer world starts to press on your inner one, the shadow leans closer, not to haunt you, but to be integrated. Because fear, you begin to see, is not just a response to danger, often. It's the alarm system that goes off when your shadow dares to speak. You feel it in a conversation where you want to express anger but smile instead. You feel it when your chest tightens as you scroll through someone else's life and tell yourself you're content. You feel it when someone gives you a compliment that you quickly reject, because deep down, you fear it might be true. And in those moments, the mirror is there, quiet, reflective, unblinking. It doesn't accuse you. It just asks, is this who you really are? You may flinch, you may turn away, but the mirror waits, and in that space of reflection, Jung whispers something essential: what you resist persists, what you deny takes root in the dark, and what you hide eventually owns you. So, what would happen if you turned toward the mirror? Just for a moment. What would you see if you didn't judge yourself? You might see that the fear you've blamed on others, their opinions, their judgments has always been a projection of your own self-rejection. You might realize that what you fear in them is what you haven't loved in you. The messiness, the contradictions, the parts that don't fit into the roles you've been playing for too long. And yet, there is power in looking. There is a quiet alchemy that happens when you no longer need to run. You begin to see that the mirror isn't cruel, it's kind. It tells the truth, but gently. It doesn't demand that you fix anything. It only asks that you witness what's there. That witnessing without shame, without agenda, is the beginning of freedom. You don't have to love every part of yourself overnight. You don't even have to understand them, but you do have to stop pretending they're not there. Because the fear doesn't come from what's inside you. It comes from the pressure of holding it all in. Imagine letting it breathe. Imagine letting the wild, unfiltered, trembling parts of you have space to exist. What happens then? The fear begins to dissolve. Not because it disappears, but because you've taken its power away. You've stopped treating it like the enemy and started seeing it as the signal that says, there's more of you to love. There's more of you to live. You were never meant to be small. You were never meant to be hidden. And yet, you adapted. You shrank to survive. But survival is not the same as living. And now, you feel that truth rising in your chest, like something familiar returning home. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be whole. And wholeness includes the parts you feared the most. So the next time the mirror appears, pause. Let yourself see. Not the version you perform, not the version you control, but the one that exists behind all the noise. Let her speak. Let him breathe. Let them come closer. Because when you stop avoiding the mirror, you begin to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. And that memory, that return, that's where courage is born. You were taught many things: how to be polite, how to fit in, how to meet expectations, play by the rules, stay safe. You were taught how to achieve, how to avoid mistakes, how to keep your voice even when your heart was shaking. But what you were never taught was how to live without fear. No one told you how to trust your inner knowing when everything outside of you said otherwise. No one looked into your eyes and said, you don't have to earn love by shrinking yourself. No one taught you that safety isn't found in hiding. It's found in being fully seen and accepted by yourself first. So you learned fear like a language. You picked it up from the tone of a parent's voice, from the look in a teacher's eyes, from the silence after you said something that was too real. You absorbed fear in the places where love should have been unconditional, but came with conditions instead. And slowly, piece by piece, you constructed a world inside you where fear lived in the foundation. It was the background noise in every decision, the invisible hand guiding you away from risk, from vulnerability, from joy. You learned to second-guess yourself before anyone else had the chance. You learned to dim before anyone asked you to shine. But fear is not your nature. It is your inheritance. and what is inherited can be unlearned. There is something wild and ancient within you, older than the fear, deeper than the programming. Call it soul, call it self, call it the voice beneath all voices. That part of you has always known the truth, that you are not here to be imprisoned by your mind. You are here to return to your essence. Jung knew that the journey toward wholeness is not a straight line, it's a spiral. You revisit the same wounds, but each time from a deeper vantage point. And every time you choose truth over fear, you unwind a little more of what was never yours to carry. So much of your fear was never actually yours. It was given to you through culture, through family, through stories that told you what was acceptable and what was not. You inherited fears about failure, rejection, aging, aloneness. You were handed beliefs about what makes a life successful, what makes a person good. But did anyone ask you what you believed? That's the quiet rebellion now to ask yourself, what do I know to be true, beneath all the noise? Start there. There's no shame in having lived with fear. You did what you had to do. You made it this far, after all. But now the invitation has arrived, not to reject your fear, but to see through it, to recognize where it ends and where you begin. You might feel the resistance rise as you peel back the layers. That's normal. The mind has become familiar with the mask. The ego clings to the known, even when it hurts. Fear keeps you tethered to the familiar, but the soul, it pulls you forward, into mystery, into truth, into the possibility that you could be something more than a reaction to your past. You don't need a 10-step plan. You don't need permission. You only need presence. So slow down. Notice when fear speaks. Is it your voice or is it an echo? Does the fear say, don't try? Or does it say, if you try, you might lose love? Does it whisper, stay small? Or does it mean, if you shine, you might be alone? Behind every fear is a hidden longing. What's yours? To be seen, to be safe, to be free. You were never taught to ask those questions, but you can begin now. And what happens when you do? You awaken. Not all at once, but slowly, like a dawn that doesn't apologize for the night, like light finding its way through the cracks. You awaken to your voice, your choice, your worth. Not because someone else said so, but because you remembered. You are not broken. You were simply never shown the way home to yourself. Until now. There was a time when it made perfect sense to hide, when being too loud, too emotional, too opinionated felt like a risk. When you learned that safety didn't come from being real, but from being acceptable. That was the mask. And for a while, it worked. You wore it with grace. You knew how to smile when you were exhausted, how to nod when your chest screamed no, how to change your tone, your pace, even your dreams just to keep the peace. You called it strength. You called it maturity. But deep down, it was fear dressed up as control. The mask wasn't a lie. It was a strategy. It was how you survived the moments when your truth wasn't welcomed. It was how you stayed connected to people who only knew how to love your edited self. It was how you avoided rejection before it could hurt you. But over time, the strategy became a prison. And now you feel it. The weight, the ache, the dissonance between who you are and who you've been pretending to be. You look around and wonder if people love you. Do they really love you? Or just the version you've curated? Jung believed that the persona, the mask, is necessary in society, but it becomes dangerous when you forget that it's a mask, when you begin to believe it is you, when you start shaping your life around a role instead of a soul. And so much of your fear lives in that gap, the space between your authenticity and your image, because every time you step closer to truth, the mask trembles, and you wonder, will I still be loved if I drop this? It's a haunting question. But here's the secret. The people who truly belong in your life don't need the mask. They aren't interested in your performance. They want your presence. And more importantly, you do too. There's a certain grief that comes with taking the mask off. You begin to realize how long you've hidden, how often you said yes when you meant no, how deeply you long to be seen, even as you camouflaged yourself in approval. But beneath that grief is something more powerful, a sense of return, a quiet liberation, the sense that maybe for the first time in a long time, you don't have to perform. So what happens when you loosen the grip? You feel raw, tender, unguarded. The mask gave you distance. Now, without it, everything feels closer, more vulnerable, but also more real. The laughs feel deeper. The tears feel truer. The silences feel sacred, not awkward. You begin to see that safety was never in the mask. It was in your ability to hold yourself when no one else could, to say, "This is me," even when your voice shakes, to let your real self walk into a room, even if some people walk out. That's not danger, that's freedom. And fear, it begins to shift. From a wall into a window, from a warning into a whisper. It says, "Are you sure?" But instead of retreating, you respond with truth. You begin to trust that the ground beneath you is stronger than the illusion you built above it, that your soul is more solid than your image, that the people who matter will meet you where you are not, where you pretend to be. So, here's the question. Now, what part of you is still wearing the mask? What truth are you afraid to speak? What need have you buried beneath a smile? You don't need to rip the mask off. You can peel it gently, layer by layer. You can meet each part of yourself with tenderness. You can say, "I wore you because I had to, but I don't have to anymore." And slowly, with each breath, with each moment of honesty, you come home, not to someone new, but to someone real. You! Sometimes, the fear you feel isn't in your mind, it's in your breath, your shoulders, the way your stomach tightens when someone raises their voice, the way your chest constricts before you speak your truth, the way your hands tremble when you try to rest. You think it's all in your head, but your body remembers. It remembers what your mind tried to forget, the moment you were dismissed, the words you swallowed, the space you were denied, the times when being quiet was safer than being heard, the times you betrayed your own needs just to feel close to someone who couldn't meet them. Fear doesn't always announce itself as panic. Often, it comes as tension, numbness, a tiredness that no amount of sleep can touch. You carry it in your bones. You hold it in your posture. You feel it in the way you flinch when someone gets too close, not physically, but emotionally. This is not weakness. This is wisdom, your nervous system trying to protect you from what once hurt. The problem is, the body doesn't always update the story. It doesn't always know that you're safe now, so it keeps reacting to ghosts as if they're still real. Carl Jung spoke of the unconscious, not just as thought, but as presence. Your body is an extension of your unconscious. It holds memories you never put into words, and when the fear arises from within, it's not trying to harm you, it's trying to speak. But you were never taught to listen. You were taught to push through, to numb, to label your discomfort as laziness or weakness, to override the signals with productivity, to shame the fear instead of sitting beside it. And yet, healing doesn't come from pushing harder, it comes from pausing deeper. So pause now, inhale slowly, notice where your body tightens. What's it saying? Maybe your chest says, "I'm tired of pretending." Maybe your throat says, "I've had so many words locked inside me." Maybe your back says, "I'm carrying responsibilities that aren't mine." And maybe your body is asking for something far more radical than fixing. Maybe it's asking for permission to feel, to slow down, to soften. Fear loses its grip when you stop making it wrong. Begin by honoring the signals. You don't have to decode them all. You don't have to understand why your stomach aches or why your breath disappears in crowds. Just notice. Just stay. Just ask. What are you trying to show me? This is the language of embodiment. This is what it means to come home to yourself, not just intellectually, but physically, viscerally, to let your skin, your spine, your heartbeat all become part of the healing. And as you begin to listen, something shifts. The fear doesn't vanish, but it transforms. It becomes less like a threat and more like a messenger. It brings gifts, clarity, boundaries, self-compassion. You realize that your fear wasn't irrational. It was rooted in something real, but that something isn't happening anymore. It happened, it hurt, and now it can be witnessed. You begin to trust that your body is not your enemy. It's your ally. It's been protecting you for so long, and now it's tired. It's ready to release. But it can only do so when you stop running from it. What if you lay down the armor? What if you treated your body like the sacred archive that it is? What if the trembling wasn't a flaw, but a doorway? You might begin to see that fear is not something to conquer, it's something to meet. And in that meeting, you offer yourself what no one else could, safety from within. The kind of safety that doesn't depend on outcomes, that doesn't hinge on someone else's approval, the kind of safety that lives in breath, in presence, in touch. So place your hand on your heart, right now, and whisper to the fear, I see you, I hear you, you don't have to scream anymore. And for a moment, you might feel it, the quiet beneath the noise, the stillness that was there all along, the peace that doesn't come from being fearless, but from being fully felt. That's the beginning. That's the return. There's a point you reach where the old maps no longer make sense. The things you were told would keep you safe start to feel suffocating. The promises of certainty, of predictability, begin to blur. You stand at the edge of something vast and undefined, and you realize you're being invited into the fog. It's the fog of not knowing, of no longer pretending, of stepping forward without a script, and it's terrifying. Your mind wants a plan. Your fear wants a guarantee. Your past wants a pattern to repeat. But your soul, it wants the truth. And the truth is, clarity doesn't come before you act. It comes as you move through the uncertainty. It arrives not as a roadmap, but as a revelation. And revelations rarely come with comfort. So much of your life has been built around avoiding this fog, around doing the right thing, making the smart choice, following the safe path. But what if that path was never truly yours? What if the reason your life feels muted is because you've outgrown the old instructions? Carl Jung would tell you that this is the beginning of individuation, not rebellion for rebellion's sake, but the sacred unfolding of your own unique path. And that path does not emerge through logic alone. It emerges through the heart, the body, the symbols in your dreams, the aching in your chest when you say yes to what you want and no one claps for it. You walk into the fog not because you're reckless, but because staying still has become a louder danger. There is no script for this part, only presence, only choice. And as you take that first trembling step, you begin to feel something unexpected aliveness. Not joy, not yet, but a sense that your life is finally being lived from the inside out, that your choices are not dictated by fear, but guided by something deeper, a quiet knowing, a flicker of truth, a whisper that says, this way. You don't need to know 10 steps ahead. You only need to trust the next step, and then the next. Like walking at night with a lantern, you can only see a few feet in front of you, but that's all you ever truly need. The fog demands faith not in the world, but in yourself. And fear will come. It always does. It will say, turn back, play small, wait until you're ready. But readiness is a myth. It's a story fear tells you to keep you where it's familiar. You become ready by beginning. Even when your voice shakes, even when your hands are cold, even when your mind screams, what if, and your heart quietly answers, trust me. You may not know where this path leads. That's okay. Not knowing is not the enemy. Avoiding your soul's call is. And yes, the fog will confuse you at times. You'll doubt. You'll ache. You'll want to run back to certainty. But every time you stay, every time you breathe into the unknown, you reclaim a part of yourself. Because walking into the fog is not about figuring everything out. It's about no longer abandoning yourself just to be certain. And the more you walk, the more you realize that clarity was never outside of you. It was buried beneath the performance, beneath the fear, beneath the noise, and now step by step it's coming back. You may not be able to see the whole horizon yet, but look down. Your feet are moving. Your soul is choosing. Your life is beginning to feel like your own. And in that, there is something sacred. So pause now, in this fog. Place your hand on your heart. Ask yourself not, what should I do, but what do I know deep down, even if I can't explain it yet? And then, trust that. Because walking without fear doesn't mean you'll never tremble. It means you're no longer willing to betray your truth for the illusion of safety. The fog is not a sign you're lost. It's a sign you finally left the path that was never yours. There comes a moment when you feel exhausted, not from doing too much, but from pretending too long. You've carried armor made of perfectionism, deflection, and charm. You've deflected compliments with a laugh, turned vulnerability into a joke, spun truth into something more digestible, all of it armor, polished, heavy, protective, and suffocating. But now, the armor cracks, and beneath it, something raw waits to be seen. This is your shadow, not the villain within, but the orphaned self, the self who carries your anger, your jealousy, your desperation to be chosen, the self who asks too much, who wants to scream, or cry, or sleep for days, the self you've kept locked in the basement of your personality, afraid that if you opened the door, everything would unravel. Carl Jung didn't see the shadow as evil. He saw it as unloved, as unintegrated, as the part of you that once served a purpose but became buried because it didn't match the image you needed to survive. And now, as your mask begins to loosen and your fog becomes familiar, the shadow stands quietly at the edge of your awareness. It doesn't demand, it doesn't punish, it waits. And your fear. It rises not because the shadow is dangerous, but because your defenses are dissolving. You've built your life around keeping certain truths at bay. Now they are here, looking at you with eyes that ask, "Can you hold me now?" So, what do? First, you breathe. Then, you listen. The shadow speaks in symbols, in dreams, in gut reactions. It shows up in the envy you can't explain, the shame that sticks to your skin, the rage you apologize for before it even surfaces. It speaks through overreactions, through compulsions, through moments when you lose your center, and each time it's saying there is something in you that needs to be met, not managed. You're not broken, you're unfinished. And fear is simply the echo of an inner child who learned long ago that love came with conditions, that certain feelings were too much, that certain truths were dangerous. But you are not that child anymore. You are capable now, capable of seeing what was once too painful, capable of staying when every part of you wants to run, capable of facing the mirror and saying, "Yes, that's me, too." And here's the paradox: the moment you stop fighting the shadow is the moment you soften, not into weakness, but into wholeness. Because every part of you that you've rejected, your neediness, your ambition, your deep longing for tenderness, is a doorway, not to destruction, but to liberation. When you face the shadow without armor, something sacred happens. You reclaim power. Not power over others, not dominance, but the power to sit in your own truth without shame. The power to love the part of you that lashes out when it's scared, the part that sabotages intimacy because it's terrified of being abandoned, the part that pretends it's fine, just to avoid disappointment. And in doing so, you stop projecting, you stop blaming, you stop running from the parts of yourself you see in others. That's how fear loses its grip. Because when you know your shadow, you no longer fear it in someone else. You no longer have to defend or deflect. You can just be real, whole, here. So sit with your shadow tonight. Don't ask it to change. Just ask it to speak. What does your rage want to protect? What does your sadness long for? What does your shame still believe about your worth? Listen closely. Because behind every shadow is a sacred truth you were never allowed to live. And now you can. You can let the armor fall. You can let the shadow rise. You can let your full self emerge, not polished, not perfect, but honest. And in that honesty, fear becomes something else entirely. It becomes the signal that you are about to become more of yourself than ever before. There is a kind of love that is different from what you were taught. It doesn't seek to fix or rescue or mold. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or fade in discomfort. It doesn't flinch when the truth shows its teeth. It stays, quietly, bravely. This love begins within you. You've spent so long seeking love that would finally make you feel safe, that would soothe the tremble, fill the void, silence the doubts. You wanted someone to hold you so completely, that your fear would vanish, but the fear never truly left, did it? Because no matter how close someone came, they couldn't touch the parts of you you'd abandoned. That's what fear feeds on, the places love hasn't reached yet. Carl Jung understood this. What we do not bring into consciousness appears in our life as fate, and so you kept chasing love in people who mirrored your wounds, hoping they would be the ones to finally choose you, accept you, heal you, but each time, it only left you more uncertain. Because real healing never comes from someone else choosing you. It begins the moment you choose you. The moment you stop turning away from the parts of yourself you've been taught to hide the neediness, the insecurity, the unhealed grief, and instead turn toward them with something deeper than judgment, with presence, with compassion, with that unflinching love. And yes, it is terrifying to hold yourself in a moment of shame and say, I still love you, to feel the old fear rise and respond, you are safe with me, to sit in the ruins of an ending and whisper, even now, you are enough. This is not a love story you were taught to write, but it's the only one that can rewrite your life. Fear may never disappear entirely, but it changes when it is met with love. It softens. It no longer has to scream because it's finally been heard. The trembling still happens, but you no longer see it as weakness. You see it as aliveness, as the sign that something true is moving through you. You learn to stay when you once would have run. You learn to breathe through discomfort instead of silencing it. You learn that courage is not about feeling brave. It's about loving yourself in the moment you feel most unworthy. And slowly, you stop outsourcing your sense of safety. You stop begging for scraps of love from people who cannot feed you. You stop performing for affection and start showing up as yourself, even when no one is clapping. You realize that love is not a prize to be earned. It's the essence you were born with. So you return to the mirror you once avoided, to the voice you once silenced, to the heart you once tried to numb. And in that return, the fear begins to lose its shape. It no longer controls you, it becomes your teacher. Every time it rises, it reminds you, here is a place still waiting for love. Here is a part of you still waiting to be met. So meet it with tenderness, with truth, with a love that does not flinch. And ask yourself, gently, what part of me is still waiting for my own embrace? Because when you stop rejecting yourself, the world begins to reflect something new, not perfection, not constant peace, but resonance. You attract what aligns with your truth, not your fear. And one day, you'll look back at all the places that once scared you, the choices you were afraid to make, the parts of you you used to hide, and you'll see that each one became a doorway, not to escape, but to return, home, to love, to you. There's a subtle way fear still shapes your life through the quiet act of waiting. Waiting for the right time, waiting for permission, waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to want what you want, to feel what you feel, to become who you've always been. You don't call it waiting. You call it being patient, being responsible, being realistic. But beneath those labels is something else, the belief that you need approval before you are allowed to fully exist. You were taught early that belonging came with conditions, that desire should be moderated, that ambition was dangerous, that sensitivity was weakness, and so you waited. You shaped yourself into what would be accepted. You muted your joy when others couldn't meet it. You held back your truth until someone else made space for it. But here's the truth. No one can give you the permission your soul is asking for. Only you can. Carl Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, was not a path of external validation, but of inner realization. You do not awaken by waiting for someone else's yes. You awaken by saying yes to yourself over and over again, especially when it's hard. And yes, it is hard. Because when you begin to give yourself permission, you will feel resistance from others, from your conditioning, from the voice inside you that still believes love must be earned through sacrifice. But what if that voice isn't your truth? What if it's an echo of someone else's fear? When you begin to grant yourself permission, you begin to remember what freedom feels like. Not reckless freedom, but sacred autonomy, the freedom to speak, even if your voice is shaky, to rest, even if the world keeps spinning, to leave the room, the relationship, the role that no longer honors your becoming. You stop asking, will they understand? Will they be okay with this? Will I still be loved? And you start asking, is this true for me? Is this kind to my soul? Can I live with myself if I betray this knowing? That shift is everything. Fear begins to unravel, not because it disappears, but because your loyalty to yourself becomes stronger than your loyalty to your conditioning. And with every act of inner permission, your life begins to take shape from the inside out. You stop trying to fit into spaces that were never made for you. You begin to build your life like a home with light, with warmth, with your own fingerprints on every wall. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop performing. You start choosing. And yes, there will be grief. You may lose people. You may outgrow roles. You may have days when the doubt comes rushing back and you wonder, who do I think I am? That's okay. That's human. Just remind yourself you are not arrogant for trusting yourself. You are not selfish for choosing joy. You are not wrong for stepping away from what no longer serves your becoming. You are remembering. You are reclaiming. You are rising. And the fear, it becomes a companion, not a captor, a quiet voice that sometimes says, are you sure? And now you answer, yes, I'm sure enough to begin. This is the life you've been waiting for, not perfect, not painless, but real. So ask yourself now, what part of me is still waiting for someone else to say yes? And then say it for yourself. Because every time you choose yourself, the world learns to love the real you. There comes a moment not loud or triumphant, but quiet when you no longer wish to fight yourself. You no longer need to prove, to explain, to justify the tender truth of who you are. You just want to be, softly, fully, here. It doesn't mean the fear is gone. It means the need to armor against it has dissolved. You begin to notice how often you used to brace for life, holding your breath before a conversation, rehearsing your responses, anticipating rejection before love could even begin. So much energy spent defending a version of you that never needed defense, only compassion. And now, something shifts. You begin to live without the constant guard, not recklessly, but gently, not because the world has changed, but because you have. Carl Jung spoke of the integration of the psyche, the union of shadow and light, conscious and unconscious. You feel this not as a theory, but as a sensation, a softening, a loosening of the grip. The sense that you no longer need to carry everything alone, because you've made space inside you for the full spectrum of who you are. You become less reactive, not because you're indifferent, but because your inner world has found a rhythm that no longer mirrors chaos. You no longer need to fill the silence. You no longer fear stillness. You begin to trust your presence as enough. Living without fear isn't a state of constant calm. It's an openness, a willingness to feel everything, the ache, the joy, the longing without shutting the door. You stop chasing answers. You start listening for what's alive. You stop needing to fix the moment and start honoring it. You begin to love more honestly. You let people see your flaws, your mess, your awkward pauses, and instead of recoiling in shame, you let yourself stay. And staying without defenses is the bravest thing you've ever done. You begin to see beauty where you once saw danger, in a long exhale, in an honest, I don't know, in a slow morning where you no longer rush to be productive, but instead ask, what does my soul need today? You choose peace over perfection, connection over control, softness over sharpness. You may still be afraid, but you're no longer ruled by it. You realize that freedom isn't loud. It's the quiet confidence of choosing truth, again and again, even when no one notices, especially when no one does. You no longer wait for fear to vanish before you move. You move, and let the fear come with you. And when it does, you say, I see you. You can be here, but you don't get to drive anymore. And maybe, for the first time, you trust your wholeness enough to live unguarded. So ask yourself now, what am I still protecting, and what would it feel like to let that go? What if you trusted that you don't have to earn safety through control? What if you believe that your softness is not a liability, but a gift? Because here's the quiet truth: the more you soften, the more the world becomes a place you can live in, not as a stranger, not as a fighter, but as someone fully at home within themselves. And that is the end of fear's dominion. That is the return. That is the awakening. Now, slow everything down. Let the words fade and the space expand. You've been walking through the tangled forest of your own fears. You've seen their faces, felt their weight, heard their whispers, and you stayed. You didn't flinch, you didn't run, you breathed and kept breathing. That's what courage truly is. Feel your body now. Let your shoulders drop, your jaw loosen, your breath lengthen. There's nowhere to go in this moment, nothing to prove, nothing to defend. The world can wait. You've been carrying yourself for so long, haven't you? And now, maybe for the first time, you feel what it means to be held not by another, not by the illusion of certainty, but by your own presence. This is what the journey was always leading to, not the erasure of fear, but the return to love, not a perfect life, but a present one, a life where you move slowly, where you listen, where you allow, where you are no longer chasing some ideal version of yourself, but meeting the one who's been here all along. Look at how far you've come. Feel how much more space there is in your chest, in your being. You have nothing to hide now, nothing to fear. The love you seek is already within you.